"She never left this place," the girl said in front of the sealed room, "but when they break in, something unexpected is found." Comment telling me what you thought of this story, giving it a score from 0 to 10, and tell me what city you're watching from. I really want to know if you like my story and get to know you better, so subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The March rain beat insistently against the second-floor windows of the commercial building on Westfield's main street, creating a monotonous rhythm that accompanied William Morgan's dark thoughts. At 52, he had built his reputation as a ruthless entrepreneur in the grain export business, maintaining business relationships based exclusively on numbers and contracts. His mahogany desk reflected this philosophy. Papers organized mathematically, pens aligned with military precision, and a single-framed photograph turned face down ever since Lucy had left 3 years earlier, taking with her not just her clothes, but also any trace of human warmth that might have remained in his life. The office occupied the second floor of the 3-story building he had inherited from his father, Sebastian Morgan, a man who taught his son that feelings were dangerous luxuries in business. The third floor had remained sealed for years, its rooms serving only as storage for old furniture and dusty documents that William never bothered to examine. The first floor housed small businesses that paid their rent on time, contributing to the financial stability he valued above all else. On that particularly rainy afternoon, while reviewing export contracts for the nearest major port, a movement on the street caught his attention. A small girl, no more than 4 years old, was walking alone on the soaked sidewalk, her brown hair stuck to her face by the rain. She wore a faded blue dress and sandals that were clearly too big for her tiny feet. What disturbed William most was the determination in her steps, as if she knew exactly where she was going. The child stopped in front of the building and lifted her wet face to the third-floor windows. She remained there for several minutes, completely still, ignoring the rain that ran down her cheeks. William felt an inexplicable discomfort growing in his chest, a feeling he preferred to keep buried, along with other inconvenient emotions. When he finally decided to go down to check what the girl wanted, she had disappeared. He examined the empty sidewalk, looking for signs that someone had been there, but only the puddles of rain remained as evidence. For the rest of the afternoon, he tried to concentrate on the papers scattered across his desk, but his eyes constantly returned to the window. The next day, she was there again. This time, William watched more closely. The girl didn't just look at the third floor. She pointed to a specific window, the same window over and over, as if trying to communicate something urgent. Her lips moved, but the distance prevented him from hearing any sound. The scene repeated for a whole week, always at the same time, always with the same disturbing intensity. It was Martha Smith, the 60-year-old caretaker who had been cleaning the building for over a decade, who finally clarified the mystery. She came up to William's office with a worried face, her rough hands twisting the cleaning cloth she always carried. She told Mr. Morgan that she needed to talk about her granddaughter, explaining that Catherine had been acting strangely lately, saying things that didn't make sense. When William asked who Catherine was, Martha explained that she was the girl he must have seen in front of the building. She was her granddaughter, living with her since they were left alone. She was only 4, but Martha said she was too smart for her age. William leaned back in his leather chair, feeling a pang of recognition, and asked what she had been saying. Martha hesitated, looking at the ceiling as if the right words were written there. She said her granddaughter claimed there was a lady on the 3rd floor, that the lady never left, that she was sad and hungry. Martha had explained that the 3rd floor was always locked, that no one was there, but the girl insisted. The silence that followed was heavy. William knew every corner of that building, every room, every closet. The third floor had been sealed since his father's passing, and he himself had locked the doors with sturdy padlocks. It was impossible for anyone to be there. Martha continued, clearly embarrassed, saying the girl had a very active imagination, but that yesterday she had brought her something. The caretaker held out her hand, revealing a small, crumpled piece of paper. She said the lady from the third floor had dropped it from the window. William took the paper with trembling fingers. It was a fragment of fabric, not paper, a piece of delicate lace that seemed to have been torn from a blouse or dress. The material was of good quality, not something a 4-year-old would own or could create. Even more disturbing was the faint but distinct perfume emanating from the fabric, a floral scent that awakened memories he had locked away along with the third floor. He asked where exactly Catherine had found it, his voice lower than usual. Martha replied that her granddaughter said she was playing in the small backyard when she saw something white floating down from the third floor window. She had climbed the old water tank to get it. William stood up abruptly, walking to the window. From there he could see the small yard at the back of the building, a narrow space between his building and the neighboring property's wall. A rusty water tank was indeed positioned so that a determined child could use it to reach higher. William asked Martha a question that might seem strange, wanting to know if Catherine had mentioned a specific name, anything about who this person might be. The caretaker shook her head. She only said, "The sad lady." But Martha added something that gave her chills. The previous night, while she was making dinner, Catherine started singing a song she had never taught her, an old song, the kind her own mother used to sing when she was little. When she asked where she learned it, the girl said that the sad lady had taught her through the window. The piece of lace between William's fingers seemed to burn his skin. Fragments of memories began to shift in his mind, like pieces of a puzzle he had refused to assemble. The scent, the old song, the impossible presence on the third floor. It all pointed to a truth he was not prepared to face. That night, William stayed in his office long after his usual hours. Through the window, he watched Catherine return to her observation post, pointing to the third floor with the same determination as always. This time, however, he paid attention not only to the girl's gestures, but also to the windows above. It was then that he saw it, a brief shadow crossing one of the third-floor windows, so fast it could have been his imagination, but concrete enough to make his heart race. Someone was there. Someone had been there all this time, and a 4-year-old child had discovered what he, as the owner of the building, had never noticed. William grabbed the keys to the third floor for the first time in 3 years, his hands shaking as he headed for the stairwell. Whatever he found up there would change everything, and for the first time since Lucy's departure, he wasn't sure he was prepared for the consequences of this discovery. The stairs creaked under William's hesitant steps, each one echoing like an omen through the silent corridor. The third floor had remained untouched for so long that the air felt thick, heavy with dust and secrets. The dim light of the hallway barely illuminated the first few doors, leaving the far end in shadows that seemed to move as he approached. The padlock on the main room was intact, exactly as he had left it after his father's funeral. But there was something different, something his eyes took a moment to process. Small footprints in the dust on the floor, tiny prints that clearly did not belong to an adult. Catherine had found a way in, but how? William examined each door meticulously until he discovered a slightly open window at the end of the hall, near the external fire escape. The peeling paint on the frame showed signs of recent use, and he realized that a determined child could indeed have climbed up there, using the water tank for support. When he finally opened the main door of the sealed room, the smell that hit him almost made him retreat. It wasn't just mold and neglect. There was something else, something human, alive. Food, used clothes, the unmistakable scent of someone who had been there for a long time. He called out, asking who was there. his voice trembling more than he'd like to admit. Silence was his only answer, but William knew he was not alone. There was movement in the shadows, a presence trying to hide, but whose breathing he could hear. He turned on his phone's flashlight and swept it slowly across the room. The room was unrecognizable. Old furniture had been rearranged to create a living space. An old mattress occupied a corner surrounded by yellowed books and pieces of fabric that served as blankets. Dirty plates were stacked on a box that served as a makeshift table. Someone was actually living there. He said he knew she was there, trying to sound less threatening, stating he wouldn't hurt her and just wanted to talk. That's when he saw the eyes, two bright points reflecting the light from his phone, hidden behind a toppled bookcase. For a moment that seemed an eternity. Man and shadow watched each other. He whispered her name, Isabella, the word escaping his lips before he could stop it. The figure behind the bookcase moved slightly, and William heard something that made his world fall apart. A low sob, full of recognition and fear. It was impossible, but he knew that sound. He had grown up hearing that specific cry during his parents' fights, when his younger sister would hide in her room to escape the shouting. He said her name again, telling her it was him, William, and that she could come out, that everything was okay. The woman who emerged from the shadows was a devastated version of the sister he had known, painfully thin, her graying hair cut unevenly, wearing clothes that seemed to have been patched countless times. But her eyes were unmistakably the same, green like his, large and expressive, now filled with a mixture of relief and terror. She told him he shouldn't have come, her voice hoarse from disuse. She said they told her he couldn't know, that no one could know. He asked who they were. She shook her head frantically, backing away again, saying she couldn't talk. If she did, they would take her back to that place, that horrible place where they gave her medicine, that made her forget who she was. William felt as if he had been punched in the gut. He asked what place she meant, reminding her that she had vanished 3 years ago. They had searched, spoken to the police. Their mother had even held a memorial service. A memorial service, she repeated, her eyes widening. They had told her she was sick, that she needed to stay hidden until she got better. They said he was too busy with his business to worry about her. The truth began to form in William's mind like a storm cloud. Constance, his 73-year-old mother, always controlling, always deciding what was best for the family. Evan, his younger brother, who had taken over their mother's care after Isabella's disappearance. Both had insisted she was dead, that they should move on. He asked how she got there, trying to keep his voice calm. She explained that Evan had brought her one night. He said it would be temporary, just until she was completely better. That this place was safer than the hospital, that no one would find her here to take her back. Isabella pointed to a pile of empty cans in the corner, saying he brought food sometimes, not much, but enough. William asked how often he came. She seemed confused, trying to calculate. She didn't know for sure. The days blended together, maybe once a week or every 2 weeks. He always brought medicine too, saying she needed to take it to keep from getting agitated again. William examined the empty cans more closely. Simple canned goods, stale bread, water in plastic bottles. Just enough food to keep someone alive, nothing more. His eyes filled with angry tears when he realized his sister was being kept there like a dirty secret, fed like a hidden animal. He asked about the girl, about Catherine, and how she had met her. Isabella's face lit up for the first time since he had found her. The little girl, she said, was her friend. She had appeared a few weeks ago, getting in through the window. At first she was scared, thinking the girl would tell someone, but she was different. She brought little things, cookies she snuck from home, flowers from the school garden. She talked to her. William asked if the girl knew who she was. Isabella didn't know, saying she only called her the sad lady. But she understood that she was alone. Isabella touched a small drawing made with colored pencils on the wall. It was clearly the work of a child, a woman with long hair holding a little girl's hand, both smiling under a yellow sun. The girl had made it for her, she said, so she wouldn't forget she had a friend. William looked at the drawing with a heavy heart. A 4-year-old child had offered his sister more affection and humanity in a few weeks than her own family had in 3 years. He told Isabella he needed her to tell him everything. What happened before she ended up here? Why had Evan and their mother done this? She flinched again, clearly struggling with painful memories. There were papers, she said, lots of papers their father had left. Evan said she needed to sign them, that it was to organize the inheritance. But when she started reading, she saw strange things. Money leaving accounts, properties being transferred. He asked what kind of properties. Their grandfather's farmland, she said, the lands near Rockwood, even some of the company's shares. Everything was being passed into Evan's name, as if she were already dead. Her voice grew quieter when she questioned it, when she said she wanted to understand better before signing. They said she was having an episode, that she wasn't thinking clearly. William clenched his fists and asked what else. They took her to a private clinic, to Dr. Peterson, Evan's psychiatrist friend. There they gave her medications that made her confused, that made her forget things. When she tried to protest, they increased the dosage. Isabella showed him small scars on her arms, explaining that sometimes she refused to take the pills, so they gave her injections. He asked how long she was in that place. Months, she thought, maybe a year. It was hard to remember, but one day she managed to pretend she was taking the medicine, spitting it out later. Her mind started to clear, and she realized she had to get out of there before it was too late. The story Isabella told over the next 2 hours painted a picture of manipulation and greed that left William nauseated. Evan had orchestrated the entire scheme with Constance's complicity, using Isabella's fragile emotional state after an abusive relationship as a pretext to question her sanity. She concluded by saying Evan brought her here when she threatened to tell William everything. He said she would be safe here until they decided together what to do. But that was 2 years ago. 2 years. When they finally left the 3rd floor, it was past midnight. William had insisted that Isabella come to his apartment, but she refused, terrified that Evan would find out. They agreed he would return the next day with decent food and clean clothes while they carefully planned their next steps. The next morning, however, everything would change again. Martha was waiting for him in the office with a panicked expression and a revelation that would put Catherine in danger. Martha was visibly shaken when William arrived at the office the next morning. Her hands trembled as she held a yellowed envelope, and there were dark circles under her eyes that suggested a sleepless night. She told him that something terrible had happened the night before. After he left, Catherine started asking strange questions about his family, asking if he had siblings, if they lived far away. William felt a chill run down his spine and asked what else she had asked. Martha said she wanted to know why men in dark suits sometimes came to the building at night when they thought no one was watching. Martha handed him the envelope with trembling fingers, explaining that Catherine gave it to her, saying the sad lady had asked her to deliver it to him. The envelope had no external identification, but when William opened it, he found a handwritten letter in Isabella's irregular script and a small golden key he didn't recognize. The letter said that if he was reading this, it meant something had happened to her. Evan had been there that morning, more agitated than ever. He said someone was asking questions about her in town, that they needed to resolve the situation for good. He brought new papers for her to sign and threatened to take her back to the clinic if she didn't cooperate. The key, she wrote, was for their father's safe, the one hidden behind the bookcase in the old office. The original will documents were in there, the real ones. She warned him to be careful who he trusted, that they had eyes everywhere, and signed it I am. William asked where Catherine was now, trying to keep his voice calm. Martha said she was at school, thank God, but she was scared. The child knew things she shouldn't, and she worried someone might decide she was a problem. Before William could respond, his desk phone rang. It was Constance, his mother, a rare event since she hardly ever called his office. She told him she needed to talk to him, that it was about family matters that couldn't wait, and to come home now. When he started to say he was busy, she cut him off, stating it wasn't a request. She said Evan had told her about his recent curiosities. They needed to clear some things up before he made mistakes the whole family would pay dearly for. The call ended abruptly, leaving William certain that Evan had discovered his visit to the third floor. He looked at Martha, who had turned pale listening to the conversation. She begged him not to go alone, that something wasn't right. She told him Catherine had seen Mr. Evan talking to strange men in the back parking lot yesterday. She had hidden behind the dumpster but heard them talking about solving the problem of the snooping girl. William felt his blood run cold. If Evan was considering Catherine a threat, the situation had become much more dangerous than he had imagined. He instructed Martha to pick up Catherine from school early, making up any excuse, and not to leave her alone for a minute. He took the key, put it in his pocket, and said he was going to resolve this today. The Morgan family home was in a quiet residential neighborhood of Westfield, a brick building that breathed tradition and conservatism. Constance greeted him in the living room, her grey hair perfectly coiffed and her impeccable clothes, contrasting with the obvious tension on her face. Evan was sitting on the brown leather sofa, his 40 years evident in the premature wrinkles around his eyes and the tense posture of his shoulders. Unlike his mother, he seemed to have slept poorly. His clothes were rumpled, and a nervous restlessness marked his every move. Constance ordered William to sit down, saying they had a lot to talk about. He replied that he imagined so, remaining standing, especially about their sister who supposedly died 3 years ago. The ensuing silence was heavy with tension. Evan shifted uncomfortably on the sofa, while Constance maintained her impassive expression. She finally said that Isabella was sick, very sick. Ever since the divorce, she hadn't been the same, suffering from psychotic breaks, delusions, and self-harm attempts. She accused William of being so absorbed in his own problems after Lucy left that he never noticed her condition. He shot back, asking if she was sick enough to be kept prisoner on the 3rd floor of his building. Evan finally spoke, his voice defensive, claiming it wasn't a prison but protection. He argued that William hadn't seen how she was after her stay in the public hospital, where they had drugged her so much she could barely form coherent sentences. William retorted, asking if they had decided to drug her themselves. Constance exploded, shouting that they decided to take care of her in the best way possible, which included keeping her away from situations that could worsen her condition, away from people who could exploit or hurt her even more. William saw the fallacy in the argument and asked about the documents she refused to sign, the inheritance papers. The hesitation was brief but telling. Evan exchanged a quick look with his mother before answering that Isabella was not in a mental state to make important financial decisions, and that someone needed to ensure the family's assets were properly preserved. William asked sarcastically for whom exactly they were being preserved. Constance stood up abruptly, retorting that it was for all of them. She told William he had always been the most ambitious of her children, building his company and his business. But Isabella was always fragile, even before her illness, making impulsive decisions and getting involved with the wrong people. If they had left control of the assets in her hands, she might have spent her own inheritance, which she declared would be a terrible tragedy. Evan also stood up, his patience clearly wearing thin, telling William he didn't understand the full situation. There were debts, financial commitments made based on the asset reorganization. If Isabella appeared now, claiming she was coerced or manipulated, William interjected that she was coerced and manipulated. Evan challenged him to prove it, to prove that a woman with a documented history of mental instability didn't voluntarily sign papers that would ensure her own care and protection. It was then that William understood the magnitude of the trap they had built. It wasn't just fraudulent documents. It was a complete system of legal and medical justifications that painted Isabella as incompetent and them as dedicated caregivers. He asked what they intended to do now, keep her hidden forever. Constance replied firmly that they intended to do whatever was necessary to protect the family, and that included protecting her from people who might be filling her head with dangerous ideas. The implicit threat was clear. William understood he was not just fighting for Isabella's freedom, but potentially for his own safety and Catherine's. He asked what would happen if he disagreed with their methods. Evan smiled humorlessly and told him he hoped he would think carefully about the consequences for everyone involved, including certain curious children who were asking questions where they shouldn't. The direct mention of Catherine made William clench his fists. He warned them not to touch a hair on that girl's head. Constance interrupted, saying no one wanted to hurt anyone. They just wanted the situation resolved in a civilized manner, keeping everyone's best interests in mind. William left his parents' house certain that time was running out. Evan and Constance were not just manipulative. They were desperate people, protecting a scheme that could ruin them if exposed, and desperate people were capable of extreme acts. When he got back to his office, he found Martha waiting with Catherine by her side. The girl seemed smaller and more fragile than ever, her big eyes fixed on her grandmother's worried face. Martha said in a low voice that Catherine had something to tell him, something she saw that morning. The child looked up at William, and with the brutal honesty typical of her age, said that the man in the suit told the other man they needed to make the sad lady disappear for real this time, and then they talked about making her forget everything she saw. At that moment, William knew it was time to stop reacting and start acting. But first, he needed to find out exactly what his father's safe contained, and if the documents stored, there would be enough to dismantle the web of lies his family had woven around Isabella. The search for the safe in his father's abandoned office brought William back to memories he preferred to keep buried. The place had remained untouched since Sebastian Morgan's passing, its walls still imbued with the smell of cigars and pen ink that characterized the family patriarch. The solid wood bookcase initially resisted William's efforts, but when he finally managed to move it, it revealed a small safe embedded in the wall, just as Isabella had described. The golden key turned smoothly, and what William found inside completely changed his understanding of the extent of Evan and Constance's manipulation. Besides his father's original will, which did indeed name Isabella as the main beneficiary of the inheritance, there was a series of documents that revealed the true motivation behind her abduction. Among the papers was a series of letters exchanged between Evan and Dr. Peterson, the psychiatrist who had treated Isabella. The correspondence revealed a financial agreement where the doctor received substantial payments to maintain false diagnoses in Isabella's medical records, justifying her involuntary commitment and subsequent declaration of mental incompetence. Even more disturbing was a contract for the sale of the family's lands, dated just 2 months prior, where Evan had sold the most valuable property of the inheritance to a real estate development company for a price far below market value. The sale was only possible because Isabella was legally dead, eliminating the need for her signature as a co-owner. William photographed each document with trembling hands, finally understanding that this wasn't just about family greed, but an elaborate fraud scheme that could lead to years in prison for those involved. This explained Evan's growing desperation and willingness to resort to threats. When he returned to the building, he found a scene that made his blood freeze. Martha was on the ground floor, clearly in a panic, holding a sobbing Catherine. Martha exclaimed that they had taken her, the lady from the third floor. They came in an ambulance and said it was an authorized medical transfer. When William asked when it happened, she said it was an hour ago. Catherine had seen everything from the school window and ran here. The men wore white uniforms, but she said she recognized one of them as the same man she saw talking to Mr. Evan yesterday. William knelt in front of Catherine, whose big eyes were red from crying. He asked if she heard them say where they were taking the lady. Between sobs, the girl managed to reply that they talked about a new clinic. They said that there she would rest forever and no one would bother her again. The sinister euphemism was not lost on William. Evan had decided to solve the problem of Isabella permanently, and the window of opportunity to save her was closing fast. He told Martha that he needed her and Catherine to go to a safe place, a hotel on the edge of town called the Valley Inn. He told them to check in and not leave the room until he called. When Martha asked about Isabella, he promised he would bring her back, a determination he hadn't felt in years burning in his chest. Dr. Peterson's private clinic was on the outskirts of Westfield, a discreet complex surrounded by high walls and fences that looked more like a prison than a hospital. William had called a trusted lawyer in the city, Mr. Davies, quickly explaining the situation and asking for guidance on how to proceed legally. Mr. Davies had said that with the documents he described, they had a solid case for kidnapping and false imprisonment, but they needed to act before they had time to alter records or transfer the patient elsewhere. William arrived at the clinic, accompanied by the lawyer and a court officer. Mr. Davies had managed to mobilize in record time. The receptionist, visibly nervous, initially tried to deny that Isabella was at the facility, claiming they had no patient with that name admitted there, avoiding eye contact. Mr. Davies presented the legal documents with professional authority, stating they had a court order to inspect the premises and locate Isabella Morgan, who was brought there against her will about 3 hours ago. The arrival of Dr. Peterson in the lobby was tense. The psychiatrist, a short, chubby man in his 60s, tried to maintain a professional facade, but William could see the poorly disguised panic in his eyes. He claimed there was a misunderstanding, that the patient in question was admitted voluntarily by family members concerned for her mental well-being. Mr. Davies retorted that in that case, there would be no problem in allowing them to see her and personally confirm her consent. They found Isabella in a room at the end of the third-floor corridor, sedated and connected to unnecessary medical equipment. She looked even more fragile than when William had found her in the building, and there was a fresh injection mark on her arm. When she woke up and saw her brother, Isabella began to cry, not from sadness, but from relief. She whispered that she knew he would come, that even when they said he had agreed to the commitment, she knew it wasn't true. The confrontation with Dr. Peterson in the presence of the court officer revealed the extent of the corruption. Faced with the documentary evidence and the threat of criminal prosecution, the psychiatrist confessed to the scheme, implicating not only Evan, but also other doctors and clinic staff who participated in fraudulent commitments. He confessed with a trembling voice that Evan had approached him 3 years ago, saying his sister was squandering the family inheritance and needed to be protected from herself. The payments started small, but when she began to question the documents, they decided it was easier to keep her drugged and hidden, as William completed with disgust. The most shocking revelation came when Isabella, her mind finally free from the forced medications, told William about the true extent of Evan's plans. It wasn't just about stealing her inheritance. He had planned to use the money to expand the scheme, buying other properties through fraudulent powers of attorney and creating a document forgery network that involved several families in the region. She revealed that he had told her she was just the first case, that there were other problematic people who needed to be removed for the good of their families. 3 weeks later, William watched Isabella playing with Catherine in the backyard of her renovated house, a home he had specially prepared to welcome both his sister and the girl. After obtaining temporary guardianship of Catherine, when it became clear that Martha, despite all her love, lacked the financial means to raise her alone. Evan was in jail, awaiting trial for an impressive list of crimes, including kidnapping, document forgery, and financial fraud. Constance, although not criminally charged due to her age and the argument of emotional manipulation by her younger son, had lost all moral authority over the family and now lived in seclusion in a nursing home. Dr. Peterson and other clinic staff also faced charges, and the investigation had uncovered at least 6 other similar cases of people held in private confinement under false medical pretexts. Isabella's inheritance was fully restored, but more important than the money was the recovery of her identity and dignity. She had decided to use part of the resources to create a support center for victims of family abuse and kidnapping, turning her traumatic experience into a force for good. Catherine flourished in the new environment, her natural curiosity and courage now directed toward healthy activities like art and dance classes. She continued to call Isabella the sad lady for a few weeks, until one day, seeing her laugh for the first time, she announced that now she was the happy lady. Martha remained as the building's caretaker, but now she also helped care for Catherine when William was working, creating an improvised but genuine family based on mutual love and protection. For William, the experience had completely changed his perspective on family and responsibility. The cold businessman, who had isolated himself after Lucy's departure, discovered that true wealth lay in the human connections he had neglected for so long. On a sunny Sunday afternoon, as he watched Catherine teach Isabella how to draw colorful birds, William realized he had finally found something he had lost long ago, a real home, built not on blood or obligation but on choice and genuine love. The 4-year-old girl who had mysteriously appeared in his life had been the catalyst for saving not only Isabella but the entire family they had created together. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story, giving it a score from 0 to 10, and thank you so much.